All right. Of course, my microphone's not working. That would be too easy. Hello, hello. The soundboard is on. It's just being difficult. I didn't turn on the speakers. There we go. Ooh. It's hot.
Oh, golly. Sorry. I'm just going to hold it like 18 inches away. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to week 4 of Summer Roundtable. We are going to continue talking about strengthening our marriage, but unlike Sunday mornings, this is specifically meant to be a conversation between you and your spouse, between us and you, and we are going to ask you to complete some activities and do some homework. Over the next few weeks as we continue on, we also have a resource list that we will release at the end of the series, but if you are not in the church app, go ahead and get in the church app because there are a ton of resources that we're dropping, as well as the videos and the homework and any of the handouts that we give out on Wednesday nights. We're going to go over a couple ground rules. You've heard them before, but the first one is you have to be engaged. You have to have a conversation. You have to talk. And we don't want any of the questions that we ask to be rhetorical. You are going to converse and have some discussions. Last week, we had some pretty intense topics to talk about. We're going to finish up our conversation on sex tonight, as well as move on to communication. With that, the second rule is that you have to be kind, because we are all learning together, and no one is a marriage expert in the room, so we want to make sure that all of our conversations are marked with kindness, and we all have our listening ears on. I wanted to say that every week, so put on your listening ears if you don't have them on. This is also discussion-based, so we want to make sure that you get all the answers to all the blanks, but we only have an hour and a half to get through the content, so we are going to go quickly. As you guys are finishing up eating and looking through your resources for tonight, we're going to jump in specifically with this question that you can discuss with your spouse, or if you're at a table with someone else, you can also have this conversation as a whole table. But how did your homework go this week? Were you able to complete it? Did you find any of it easy? What did you find most difficult? And if you didn't do your homework, not pointing any fingers in the class, but if you didn't finish your homework, take a look at what your homework was supposed to be and just mark one of those things that you maybe can spend the next 5 minutes doing right now.
Oh, well, that's going to be really hard for you.
Go stand in the corner with your nose against the wall. Lucky for you, we can print homework on demand.
All right. So last week, we started exploring 3 important questions about love and how we relate to each other. We covered what is love, and we covered how does one give and receive love. This week, we're going to talk about developing the habit of happiness, and we're going to look at the 3rd question that we didn't get to last week, which is how can you make love last a lifetime? So, you're going to need this handout right here. It's the one that says develop the habit of happiness at the top. Okay, we're going to start with that. Do you not have any? You don't have anything? Oh. Hang on. Oh, all right. Fail. Okay.
Keely's the class assistant.
There we go. See?
She has classroom helper job for today.
All right. So last week we looked at how passion, intimacy, and commitment were essential to building love that lasts. This week we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to look at the 5 common stages of love in a marriage. If you've been married any length of time, then you know that passionate love that starts a marriage cannot sustain a marriage. Throughout your marriage, research shows that the love that you have for your partner will change a lot. And it's going to take different forms over the lifetime that you're together. If we can accept the fact that love changes, then we can appreciate how love's many forms strengthen and deepen our relationship with each other. If we do not expect or plan for these changes, our relationship will quickly run off the tracks.
And so while each of you as a couple are unique and every marriage in this room is unique, all marriages do go through these particular stages that are very predictable stages of love. Okay? Every stage of this predictable path has its own challenges and its own opportunities for to build upon each other. If you grow individually and as a couple through each stage, your love life will reach its full potential. But again, it goes back to the very first week. You both have to make the commitment to do the work. So the first stage is romance. Everybody say, "Aw." No, romance. It's a time when couples nearly forget that they are unique individuals with separate identities. It is the shortest stage, but it's one of the most unique. This particular stage of romance creates kind of a spiritual union as each spouse strives to fulfill their deepest needs of intimacy while celebrating the ecstasy of marital bliss and belonging. It's lovey-dovey. It's the honeymoon phase, if you will. Stage 2 of this is the power struggle. All married couples go through this stage. It is filled with strife and tension when your differences become overwhelmingly obvious that you can't ignore them anymore, right? The intensity and the turmoil of this stage of the power struggle can vary among couples, right? But your marriage has to go through it you have to pass through it. You can't stay stuck there. And that's where that momentum comes in, where you have to have that momentum to keep going through this, okay? When our illusion of romance and the perfect partner is shattered, that is when we reach this phase, right? Like the rose-colored glasses come off. Honeymoon phase is over. Stage 3 is cooperation.
So this stage feels like a breath of fresh air, especially after the last stage that was filled with so much struggle. In this stage, a couple relinquishes the idea that their partner needs to make them happy. And they begin to redefine their love by coming to grips with their fears and their defense mechanisms. They come to grips with their hurt and their projections that they've put on their spouse. Stage 4 is mutuality. This stage often lasts a long time. As love grows, couples eventually enter into a new stage where mutuality becomes foundational. Mutuality is reached when a couple feels emotionally in sync and empathy grows, and self-sacrifice for the other takes priority. Then stage 5 is when couples become secure in themselves and their love, which creates incredible energy for co-creativity. This stage is the peaceful period of love, which transcends all the previous stages and results in a stronger and deeper love than any other stage that they've gone through.
The longer that you are married, as you go through this life together, your love is going to change. So as your young passion fades, you are going to notice that as long as you get through that power struggle, the remaining stages that you go through are going to replace that young passion with deeper, more abiding sense of care for the other person, more intimacy, and more of that co-creativity. A lot of this, what gets us through these phases, comes from our individual and our joint attitudes of our marriage, okay? We're going to talk specifically in a little bit about our individual attitudes in your marriage and how you as individuals have to come to the table with specific attitudes and specific needs of how you need to be communicated to. But you have to decide that you and your partner will be happy. Right? Like it might not always be happy, but you will choose to be happy in your marriage, okay? If you and your partner have the attitude that we are going to have a happy marriage, it will be a more fulfilling marriage. In marriage and in life, it's essential that we have to develop the correct attitude in spite of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Our happiness, our joy is found outside of our circumstances in our marriage, right? A happy marriage and a happy couple decide and choose to be happy. It's no accident that some couples are positive and are able to navigate tension and friction in their marriage successfully, while others are beaten down, feel defeated, feel like throwing in the towel, and feel really frustrated. But really, it comes down to a specific choice, because happiness in marriage has nothing to do with luck, and it has everything to do with the will. Happiness comes down to having the right attitude in spite of your circumstances that come your way in marriage.
So Les and Leslie Parrott, the people who developed this SYMBIS assessment, they shared a story about their interaction with a pilot who shared that the most important thing about landing a plane is the attitude of the plane. The pilot said this: "The trick is to get the right attitude in spite of atmospheric conditions." So we're going to take a moment, and you have an additional handout that is called Atmospheric Conditions. We're going to take some time and work through this handout as a couple, okay? It's two-sided, shouldn't take that long. You're going to work through this handout, and then we're going to come back and discuss it.
Did you guys find it?
Everybody find it?
You got it? Okay.
All right. Does everybody have at least a picture of what their marriage looks like drawn out? All right. We're going to have a conversation at your table. So we're going to have you guys combine tables, and Andy and Amy and Cody and Cassie, we're going to combine you guys into a table, because you're going to have a conversation at your table with at least one other couple, and you're going to give your quick meteorology report of your marriage right now and why you feel that way to the couple that's at your table. Then you're going to give some weather conditions that you might be experiencing right now. You don't need to go into the nitty-gritty details, but hey, these are some things that we're experiencing, which is why we feel this way. Once each couple is done sharing, then you're going to take a few moments to pray for the other couple at your table, okay? So we've given you some blanks to write down any prayer requests as they share with you, some blanks on your handout, this handout. There's some blanks for you to share or to write down specific prayer requests. But we want you to basically share your picture with the couple at your table and talk about your current weather conditions, and then pray for each other. All right, we're going to give you a few minutes to do that.
I'll come around with stickers and give you stickers for your drawings, because I'm sure they're beautiful.
All right, we're going to move on. I think our marriage meteorology report right now is sunny. I feel like we're kind of like Florida. We know rain will come, but we're not going to let it ruin our day. An afternoon shower makes our adventure that day more interesting. So,
Jason said that our weather is hot and sunny. I like it.
It's the way the Lord made me.
Just kidding. All right. I also put that our forecast is sunny with a slight chance of light rain because we experienced some rain, but it's not anything that won't bring cooler temperatures and a nice breeze. So, all right, go ahead and grab your SYMBIS assessment, page 11. At the top of page 11, you're going to find a percentage, and that number represents your current self-assessment of how optimistic, how adaptable, and how resilient you are feeling in your relationship when you face a challenge. The thing that you need to realize is that marriage was never intended to make you happy. You make your marriage happy, okay? And the way that you do that comes down to 3 components. It comes down to your optimism, it comes down to your adaptability, and it comes down to your resiliency. The percentages at the top of page 11 show you as individuals how optimistic, adaptable, and resilient you are currently feeling in your current state. How you feel in the area of optimism, adaptability, and resiliency, though, is not a fixed rate. It is a choice. So if you have a lower score, that is a choice that you are making. Circumstances do play a part in that, but optimism, adaptability, and resiliency can be, what's the word I'm trying to say? They can change. They can be fluid, okay? They are a choice. You don't have to stay the way that you are right now. But in order to make that possible, you have to acknowledge if you have a low score, right? If your percentage is low, you have to look at it and say, this is where I'm at right now, but I can choose to change. I can choose to be more optimistic. I can choose to be more adaptable. I can learn to be more resilient. In fact, I'll show you an example. So when we took the SYMBIS 4 years ago, my attitude was very low. It was 52%, okay? And it said, your resilience level is relatively low. Adjusting to circumstances beyond your control does not come easy, okay? Now, I'm actually very proud of this. My resiliency has been a challenge, but when faced with unforeseen difficulty, you can maintain an upbeat attitude. So my score went up from 52% to 75%. So that shows you that this is a choice that you can make. It's something that you can work on if you're willing to, okay? So let's look at each of these traits. The first one is optimism. And optimism is seeing the glass as half full as opposed to half empty, right? Few traits are more strongly linked to personal and marital happiness than the particular trait of optimism. Optimism is not the blindness to the reality of life, right? It's not thinking that everything's always going to be sunshine and roses, but rather an outlook of hope combined with the little bit of pessimism to prevent complacency and enough realism to separate those things that we can't control from the things that we can.
All right, so we're going to ask a couple connect question. This is just for the two of you and not for your table. Are you more optimistic or pessimistic? Why do you think that is? And if you are pessimistic, then what are you going to do to change that attitude? Okay? So are you optimistic or pessimistic? Why? And then if you're pessimistic, what are you going to do to change that attitude?
And this is not on the slide, but I also will add, confirm with your spouse if they think you're correct about yourself, right? Because I could say, oh, I'm super optimistic, and Robert could be like, maybe not so much, right? So answer the question, are you optimistic or pessimistic? Why is that? Confirm with your spouse. And if you're pessimistic, what are you going to do to change your attitude?
This is not a rhetorical question. We would like you to answer this question. You are one or the other. You cannot be nothing. You cannot be both. You are one or the other.
You cannot sit and not speak to your spouse. You have to speak to your spouse.
All right, the next trait that goes into your attitude is learning to adjust to things beyond your control or adaptability. If there's something you struggle with, then you're going to need to consider your own personal agendas. Here's what we mean by that. We all have agendas or expectations about everything in life, from how the dishes are loaded in the dishwasher.
Pre-washed, no food on them before they go in the dishwasher.
Just rinse them off and toss them in, all right? Or to what type of vacation you enjoy.
Which is busy, go, fast.
Yep, that's my fast pace, so we agree on that. How you load the washing machine, how many items of clothing go in the washing machine.
Just wing it. Just throw it in until it's full.
Yes.
Until it's going.
And then 3 hours later, it finally dries because I've started the drying. We've gone through like 2 heating elements in our dryer in the last year because of that.
Sounds like a dryer problem.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't
not
think
my
so.
problem.
Okay, but here's what you need to realize. We all have agendas all the time. The question is, how flexible are you with your agendas? Flexibility determines adaptability. The less flexible you are with your own agendas, the more self-focused, selfish, and egocentric you tend to be.
I think that cuts a little deep to some of us because we would all love to say like, oh yeah, I'm flexible, I'm adaptable. But when it gets down to it, if you had to make the choice between your way or somebody else's way, what are you going to pick? Most of us would be like, I have the best way, right? But it also comes out in how you respond. You're not always going to get your way. And when you don't get your way, how do you respond in that situation? Because you may not naturally have that ability to be flexible or that ability to adapt. But just because you don't naturally have that doesn't mean that when you're faced with that challenge, it's okay for you to respond like a child, right? And I think that's what a lot of us do and think it's okay. Like, oh, well, I'm not made this way, so when I respond poorly, it's okay because it's how I am. And that's not acceptable.
And what we're talking about with attitude, this is huge for your marriage, but it's also huge for every single element of your life. Interactions with your boss. If you're not flexible and you cop an attitude, things will not go well for you at work. So this area of attitude, what we're talking about, being optimistic, being adaptable, and being resilient, this is a huge part of just regular life and is essential for you to be a good human and a good Christ follower, is to be able to be optimistic, adaptable, and resilient.
Yeah. I think some of us get in trouble too with like small comments that we make, right? Like snide remarks that are said. And while we may not intentionally go into saying something and be like, I'm going to be rude in this situation, when we aren't adaptable or aren't flexible, we tend to create tension, especially in churches. That is even, being in a church family. All right, the next question that you are going to answer with your spouse is this. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not adjusting well at all, and 10 being as go with the flow all the time as possible, how would you rate your personal adaptability? So you as a person, are you a 1, that is you are rigid, you do not adjust well at all, and 10 is you're good and easy peasy with whatever decisions are made? How would you rate yourself? How would you rate your spouse? So maybe write those down, like maybe write those numbers down on your paper, right? There's a continuum 1 to 10. And then, so mark yourself, mark your spouse, and then talk about it with each other. See how closely you came. All right, if you're still having a conversation about where you fall on that scale, you can continue that conversation, because what you're going to do next is you're going to take a look at this additional handout that's called How Adaptable Are You? And this one, it might sting a little, and that's good. Basically, what you're going to do is the left side and the right side, 1 to 5. You are going to be as honest with yourself, about yourself, with the statements, okay? So you're going to read each one, mark where you're at, and then you're going to have to do some math. If you need some help, Cody is here and available to help you. Because on the back, you will see a range that you will fall into, and based on what your number is, that score will give you an overview, okay? 25 an hour. Great. It's called How Adaptable Are You? It has the giant grid on it. It's green and it has a grid on it. So you're going to go ahead, answer those about yourself, add up your score, find out what your score is, and then at the bottom, it has a few questions for you to ask each other once both of you have your score. Okay? We're going to give you a little bit more time on this one because it's a little more in depth.
All right, you might not be done yet, but we're going to move on and talk about resiliency. Every marriage, no matter how good it is, eventually will hit some tension on the tracks. The saving grace is your capacity to adjust during these tough times. Resilience is the ability to mentally and emotionally cope with a crisis. It's the ability to use our mental and spiritual capabilities to remain relatively calm during chaos and to move on from the circumstance with minimal long-term negative consequences. Okay? So I want you to think back to your storms that you wrote down you might encounter during your atmospheric conditions handout. What is one idea that you can think of that might help you be more resilient? So think back to those storms that you might have listed on your atmospheric conditions and think of an idea that will help you become more resilient with those specific circumstances.
All right, we're going to give you some time to look over and talk about the information on page 11 of your Symbis. So look at your individual attitude percentage, and is it surprising to you? Do you feel like you agree with what's stated about you underneath your picture and your percentage? Do you feel like what is stated about your partner is accurate? And if you don't feel like it's accurate, talk about what you see in there that you would disagree with and maybe put in its place what you think would be a more accurate description. All right, as you look down the page, you'll see a little umbrella, okay? And these are characteristics that are listed that describe you, okay? It says you at your best when facing a challenge. So one of you is on the left, one of you is on the right. Take a look at those characteristics and see and discuss with your partner how accurate you think those descriptive words are, which ones of them stand out to you, and go ahead and put a little like star or something by the two that stand out to you, because you're going to need those for a later activity.
No, so your answers are based on your personality profile. So there are questions in the assessment that would have prompted you to indicate how you feel you face circumstances and challenges.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The bomb. Are we at the bomb?
Oh, no, we're the one right above it. We're going to move to the bomb in a moment. Yep. On you, yes. Yep. Yeah, and with everything on this assessment, if you read something and you're like, yeah, that doesn't describe me at all, just put a line through it, because, that happens. It's not perfect.
All right, now we're going to move on down to the bomb that you see at the bottom of page 11, how your spouse may perceive you under stress, okay? So if we're looking at ours, the pink words are going to be how he perceives me. The blue words are going to be how I perceive him, okay? So like, for example, on this one, it says, on the blue, it says overly optimistic. So for me, when we are under stress as a couple, I perceive Robert as overly optimistic and want to punch him, right? Even if he's not overly optimistic in real life, that's how I perceive it, okay? So does that clarify your question? Okay. So what you're going to do with those is go ahead and look at how your spouse may perceive you under stress, what stands out, how accurate is it, and if there's anything else that you would add. Like Robert said, this is not a perfect thing, but it is pretty close and pretty accurate. But if there's something that's missing that you can pinpoint, go ahead and write that down as well.
All right, we're moving back to the conversation guide. We're going to continue on the back side and talk about how to build a marriage that has a lifetime love that lasts. So if we want to make our marriage a happy one that lasts a lifetime, it's going to require intentionality and hard work. Okay, this is one of the biggest mistakes that couples make, is they think that they don't have to work at their marriage. But your marriage takes hard work, and you have to be extremely intentional with every element of your marriage. If you want to find happiness in your marriage, you're going to have to develop a mindset and a habit of happiness. Our brains are programmed much like a computer. Before we put in any sound or sight or smell or taste or touch or any sort of intuition into our mental computers, we automatically stamp it as positive or negative. Then we store that sensation in our brains, and it permanently stays there. That's why it's really easy for you to remember how you feel about someone, even if you can't actually remember their name. Okay? But unlike computers, humans develop a habit by programming their minds to be either mostly negative or mostly positive. Okay? Often we develop a bad habit of stamping our circumstances as negative instead of making the best of our conditions, because we end up wallowing in self-pity and we allow our situations to get the best of us. So we have to determine to be happy. You have to choose to be happy. And you have to refuse to let circumstances determine our mood or our marriage. Okay? There's a workbook exercise this week called Listening to Your Self-Talk. And it's going to talk about this specific thing. Happiness doesn't happen by accident. It's a choice. Your mood doesn't happen by accident. It's a choice.
A lot of negative people feel like they could be positive if they just fill in the blank, right? I would be happy if I had a different job. I would be happy if I had a bigger house. I'd be happy if I had a different spouse. I'd be happy whatever the fill in the blank is. But the reality is that happiness does not hinge on better circumstances. A person with a bad attitude will still have a bad attitude with different circumstances, right? If you have a negative outlook on life, you are still going to have that negative outlook, even if you get whatever that fill in the blank thing is, okay? A negative person will often defend their actions with the rationale that they're being realistic, and they will label the person who is happy as being looking beyond their circumstances, right? So a negative person will say, well, I'm just being realistic. And they may characterize someone who is choosing to be happy as reaching for the moon, right? Like they're being like they're not being realistic at all, okay? But we cannot let problems we face currently or in the past or that we will face in the future keep us from being happy in our marriage, okay? Our attitude is not determined by the situations we face in life, but how we interpret them. Negative interpretations are guaranteed to zap the happiness out of your marriage. It's actually more exhausting to be negative than it is to be positive. So how do we cultivate a positive attitude when our spouse does something that we don't like? Or how do we stay positive in our mindset when life throws something at us that's hard? And the answer is that we have to take responsibility for our own feelings. Millions of couples are robbed of happiness because one or both of the spouses have developed a negative mindset. They blame their unhappiness on things that their spouse does or doesn't do. We have to choose our own attitude in every circumstance, whenever and wherever it can occur. We often hear statements when we are counseling couples like, her comments hurt me, or he makes me so angry, Okay? But the truth is that remarks, comments, and things that are said do not hurt or upset people. People can only upset themselves.
I think you need to say that one again.
Okay. The truth is, remarks and comments do not hurt or upset people. People can only upset themselves. I can only be upset by something that is said to me if I let those words affect me, right? Now, that's way easier said than done. But words and remarks and comments don't hurt if you don't give them the power. Okay? It's natural to be upset with something that we don't like, right? We don't like to be uncomfortable. But our reaction to the feeling should result a positive change within ourselves. We can make the choice when faced with something uncomfortable to either grow from it in the hopes that next time we face it, it won't be as uncomfortable. When we recognize where the control resides in ourselves and not in external events, we're able to reinterpret upsetting events and develop a more positive attitude.
All right, so along that thread, I want to share this story that Les and Leslie shared in this book, Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. It's about a man named Viktor Frankl, who was a 26-year-old Jewish psychiatrist in Vienna, Australia, when Hitler's Gestapo arrested him and put him in a concentration camp. Okay, so month in and month out, he worked under the great smokestacks that belched out black carbon monoxide from the incinerators where his father, mother, sister, and wife had been cremated. Each day, he hoped for a few slivers of carrots or peas in the daily bowl of soup. In cold weather, he got up an hour early just to wrap his feet and legs in scrap burlap and wire to shield them against the crippling cold of an East European winter. When Viktor Frankl was finally called for inquisition, he stood naked in the center of a powerful white light, while men in shiny boots strolled to and fro in the darkness, interrogating him for hours, questioning him, accusing him, and trying to break him down with every accusation and lie they could think of. They had already taken his wife, his family, his writing, his clothes, his wedding ring, and everything else of material value. But in the midst of this barrage of questions, an idea flashed across Frankl's mind. They have taken from me everything I have, except the power to choose my own attitude. Thankfully, most of us are not faced with such circumstances that the Jews faced in Nazi Germany, but the same principle that helped Viktor Frankl survive those death camps applies to every area of our life, especially our marriage. We can make a choice, and no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what the situation is, we can choose to have a positive attitude. That's why it's so important in every single marriage relationship, and every relationship, is to assume best intentions. Okay, what that means is we have to suspend our negative evaluations about each other and remember that no one can make another person unhappy. Everyone is responsible for their own attitude. Research shows that the level of happiness a couple experiences is determined by each partner's ability to adjust to things that are beyond their control. Every happy couple has learned to find the right attitude in spite of the conditions they find themselves in. Every couple must learn to develop this capacity if they want to enjoy a happy marriage. Life is filled with too many unexpected turns and unforeseen problems. Without this capacity to rise above your circumstances and develop happiness in your life and in your marriage, you will fail.
Can I add something there too?
Yeah.
Going back to what we were talking about earlier, in your resiliency and your adaptability within your job or your friendships or being in a church, this also goes right along with that. If you are going to choose to let someone's actions or someone's words that they said or words they didn't say affect your attitude and your mood, and you're going to allow that to pull you down, you have to be willing to have a hard conversation about it, right? Keely and I were just talking about this at dinner. if someone offends you, you have to say something to them. If someone upsets you, you have to say, hey, let's talk about this, right? Because if we don't do that, that is where Satan gets in those crevices, and he causes so much damage. That can be in your marriage, that can be in friendships, that can be in work dynamics, that can be with your kids, whatever it is. And so when we're choosing our attitude despite our circumstances, you have to know that you're going to face hard times. And you have the opportunity to not let words or a lack of words derail you. But sometimes we're human, right? Well, not sometimes we're human. We're always human. We are always human. Sometimes we let those words hurt us because we're human. And so if someone's words hurt you or someone's actions hurt you, you have to open your mouth and talk to them, right? And this is not I'm going to tell Robert to go tell somebody else that I'm mad or I'm upset or I'm hurt. This is Heather, I need to sit down with you and I need to talk to you, right? So that goes between your spouse, between your friends, between people within the church, between, it's what I tell my kids.
Well, and that's why we value so much hard conversations. Like, it is important. If you need to have a hard conversation, every time you put off that hard conversation, it's going to get worse because you refuse to talk about what needs to be talked about. And so if something upsets you and you don't talk to that person about it upsetting you, then it's going to upset you again, and the next time, and the next time. And eventually it balloons into this big thing that it never needed to be because you didn't have a hard conversation.
Because I wasn't willing to say, pre-wash the dishes, bro.
Yeah, we don't do that. Okay, so this choosing your attitude, having the right attitude, actually is talked about in Scripture. Paul talks about it in Philippians chapter 4 in verse 11 through 13. He says this, "Now that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned that in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me." The harsh reality is, most couples we encounter that are unhappy have chosen to be unhappy. That's why we've provided this additional handout called Avoiding the Blame Game. And you're going to read through scenarios of different couples. Some of them are couples that we've talked to. These might be real life situations that we've gone through, or we've talked to people who've gone through them. And you're going to rate who is to blame in that situation.
It's the second page after listening to your self-talk.
Yeah, so if you have the self-talk, it's page 2 of that. So it's a workbook activity you're going to do this week called Avoiding the Blame Game.
So there are 3 attitudes, 3 pretty big attitudes that sabotage marriages, right? If you want to develop the habit of happiness in your marriage, then these are 3 things that we need to try and avoid. And those are self-pity, blame, and resentment. Too many marriages have unknowingly missed out on happiness because of self-pity. The pain of self-pity that we inflict on ourselves, often hurts other people as well. So why do we continue to punish ourselves and others when the pain is not necessary and can actually be avoided? This actually goes perfect with what you were just saying about hard conversations. Hard conversations get harder the longer that they linger, right? Hard times and bitter personal experiences are a part of every couple's life, and self-pity about those difficulties helps no one. Newsflash, you are not the only marriage that may have problems, right?
Or newsflash, you're not the only one who had a bad day. So if you come home and your spouse is grumpy because they had a bad day, guess what? You have bad days too, right? So you need to be gracious towards them.
In fact, no one can ever be an effective marriage partner with the added burden of self-pity to cope with. Self-pity is a luxury that no marriage can afford.
A great deal of unhappiness in marriages can be traced to a spouse's habitual tendency to blame their spouse for everything. Blame says that our spouse is the problem and we have no part in the dysfunction.
Newsflash, you're not perfect. Neither
Right.
am I.
In many unhappy relationships, one of the spouses is often the scapegoat, the one who's responsible for that couple's unhappiness. The other spouse sees them as the source of their unhappiness. Marital unhappiness is never caused by only one person. Blaming almost always, I would actually say blaming always results in marital blow-up. To avoid the blame blow-up, we need to switch our response from blame and a counterattack. So if someone blames me, if my spouse blames me, I'm likely to strike back, right? That's my natural response. Oh, it's not my fault, it's your fault. You shouldn't have dirtied so many dishes, we wouldn't have to pre-wash them. Okay? We have to switch that mindset.
When we're done, everyone's going to buy us paper plates.
Right? Like we have to switch that mindset from when we receive criticism or blame, we should not counterattack, but we have to ask honest questions. Blame can be overcome, but only if couples habitually don't play the blame game, because when they do, their happiness will be depleted. Every symptomatic problem in marriage can be traced to a breakdown in personal responsibility. If you are angry, it is not your spouse's fault. It's your own choice. If you are depressed, it is not your spouse's fault. Your spouse has not failed you, but it's because you have chosen to be depressed. The habit of blaming your spouse is completely contrary to the principle of actually taking responsibility for your own attitude.
I just want to say there too, like, that is outside of like the realm of mental health, right? Like when you are talking
Correct.
about
Yeah.
being depressed, that's outside the realm of something clinical. That is, I'm unhappy with my marital circumstance, and that leads me to always be grumpy and crabby and all that. Okay, no one is exempt from being treated unfairly. We can all justify the anger that we feel about a situation or about someone. We can unfairly say that someone's existence complicates our life, right? But when we hold on to our disappointment, our pain, and our anger, we actually compound our troubles, and that is when resentment really takes root. When we allow all of these things to build and compound, that is when resentment starts to sink in, and that's when you're in deeper than you actually realize. You ruminate about an injustice that's done to you. Like basically that means like when you're playing that situation over and over and over again, it will trigger a flood of negative emotions that feed all the hurt. So you know how like misery loves company, that saying? That's basically what we're doing to ourselves. When I think of something that happened, and then I think, yeah, and then he did that other time too, and then, oh yeah, he did that other time. Like that's just building up that resentment. Then comes a succession of confirming incidents to convince you that you actually are right in holding on to this resentment. A happy marriage cannot survive the cancer of resentment. Like self-pity and blame, resentment can eat at the human spirit and actually kills the capacity for joy. If these toxins are removed, though, if you can stop that cycle, there's no reason why your marriage can't improve and why you can not continue to get more and more happy and be more and more satisfied in your marriage. The habit of happiness is an inside job. If you find the right attitude and the right atmospheric conditions, you can start to program or train your mind with positive impulses. We do this a lot with like when we're training dogs and like maybe small children, right? Like when we say, oh, you did a good job, that's going to make them want to do something else to get a dog treat or a cookie, or if you're my kids, maybe a dog treat, I don't know. But when you reinforce what you're wanting to see, that's going to grow. So if in my marriage, if Robert does something wrong, I can choose to say, hey, you really messed this up. Or I could choose to be like, I'm not going to say that. I'm actually going to compliment something that he did do correctly. Like, that is looking for a way to not let resentment take root in your life.
Yeah, and it goes back to assuming positive intentions. If the dishes are filled in the sink, I'm going to keep using the dish analogy. If the sink is full of dishes and you should be a man of your word and do the dishes, and you don't do them, then Kelly should assume positive intentions. Maybe I didn't do the dishes for a specific reason. So instead of coming in and saying, why are the dishes not done? The question could be, hey, did something happen? Did something come up? Were you doing something with the kids that we didn't get the dishes done? Do you need help doing it? Those sorts of things. So it's switching that mindset from assuming negative intentions or assuming the negative to assuming the positive in every circumstance, unless proved otherwise. If it ends up, I just didn't feel like doing it, well, then the conversation needs to be, okay, well, I need your help doing that. You did not show honor to me or respect to me because you didn't do what needed to be done. So, as we wrap up, we're going to talk about some homework. So, in the Church Center app, there is a Session 3 video for you to watch. If you're remarried, there's a bonus video that's specifically about remarriage. Then there are these 2 workbook exercises for you to complete, stapled together, the blame game and listening to your self-talk. Then we've provided you an extra question sheet. So when Kelly said, hey, put a star next to those 2 things on page 11, there's an extra question that specifically references those 2 things you starred. Okay? Then there is this wanted poster couple activity. So there's an example of what it looks like. Each of you have your own wanted poster handout that is 2-sided. Okay? There's directions on what you're supposed to do. There's a blank side, and then there's a side where you're filling in the blanks. Okay?
So do all of that homework. But if you don't,
do this one
one
especially.
instead.
Okay? So we gave you this spice it up sex challenge. All right? Part of having a happy marriage is having a happy sex life. Okay? These are 18 challenges, creative ways to have sex. Okay? Not ashamed of it because sex is a God-given thing. It's a beautiful thing in the context of marriage. And so these are some creative ways to do it. So look through these challenges, see which ones you might want to try out. There's an app you can download. It references in one of the challenges a specific app called the Ultimate Intimacy app, and that app is free. There's some things you have to pay to unlock if you want them. But in it has quizzes and resources and articles and games and sex positions. It has all those sorts of things that will help you have a healthy sex life. So encourage you to look through all those things, work through your homework. The Church Center app has a YouVersion Bible plan for you to do this week that's related with what we talked about. But I'm going to pray and then we'll be dismissed. God, thank you for tonight. God, thank you for an opportunity to come together and talk about how we can honor you more in our marriages. God, thank you for an opportunity to discuss what it means to have a positive attitude in life and realize that when we have negative attitudes, when we shift blame to our spouse, when we just choose to be unhappy, it affects all aspects of our lives, especially our marriage. So as we leave this place, God, we pray protection as we leave. We also pray that our discussions and our homework conversations will be fruitful. And God, we pray that we bless you and honor you in all areas of our life, especially our marriage. In Jesus' name, amen.